I felt the need to get right into something, and it involves J.J. Redick, my colleague at ESPN, and the third voice on NBA games with Doris Burke and Mike Breen replacing his former coach, Doc Rivers, okay? Here's the deal. J.J. Redick spent time on Tuesday accusing Milwaukee Bucks coach Doc Rivers of not having any accountability. On First Take, Redick, who previously played for Rivers on the Clippers from 2013 to 2017, claimed Doc is now making lots of excuses. The Bucks under coach Doc Rivers has lost 7 of their last 10 games, including 2 in a row heading into the All-Star break. Here is what J.J. Redick recently said on First Take.
I've seen the trend now. I've seen the trend for years.
What's the trend?
The trend is always making excuses. Doc, we get it. Taking over a team in the middle of the season is hard. It's hard. We get it. Just like getting traded in the middle of the season is hard for a player. We get it. But it's always an excuse. It's always throwing your team under the bus. They lose to Memphis. Oh, it's his players. Memphis was playing G League guys and two-way guys. And then you look at his quotes over the weekend. Now he wants to take credit for the James Harden trade to the Clippers working out. He wants credit for that. There's never accountability with that guy.
Now, Patrick Beverly, who currently plays for Doc Rivers in Milwaukee, spent time defending his coach from the scathing criticism by J.J. Redick. He wrote this in his social media post. This man, Doc Rivers, actually saved your career. Started you when no one else wanted to. And you retire, go on TV and say that? Question mark. Actually, there was no question mark. I apologize. Needless to say, J.J. Redick was going to have a response to that because he immediately responded to Patrick Beverly by saying, Pat, my guy, I had a 4-year offer with a player option for the same money to be a starter for a different team. FOH, as in fuck out of here, okay? Saved my career. That's what J.J. Redick had to say in response to Patrick Beverly. Needless to say, it was only right to hear from the son of Doc Rivers, who's Austin Rivers, who also works at ESPN, spending time on NBA Today that Tuesday afternoon, just hours after hearing what J.J. Redick said about his daddy. Listen to this.
First off, I don't feel responsible to take up for my dad. He's a grown man. He could do his own thing. But in this regard, I just simply don't agree with it. For someone who's not accountable, he seems to always be held responsible, considering he's the guy that's always fired when things don't go right. He got fired in the bubble for a 3-1 lead versus the Denver Nuggets, which in half his team didn't want to be there. They had players saying that their mind wasn't there. He had guys leave. That happened. Then he gets fired for losing to a team that was favored over him, which was the Celtics last year. It seems like he's always responsible. It's just as strange coming from JJ. And I have some love for JJ. You're my dookie. You know that. You're my bro. I love you. It's just your best years were with the Clippers. I don't think he saved your career. I appreciate you, Pat. But I don't think it – I mean, this just seems a little bit weird. They're 3-7. Dame has missed most of those games. Middleton's missed a lot of those games. They haven't even had their full team yet. We'll see what happens. The pressure is there. They do have to perform. But in terms of accountability, like, what are we doing here? Your best years in the NBA were when you played for him in the Clippers. Let's not forget that. I don't know if there's like frustration there or there's tension there between you. I know a lot of times we had to sit you towards the end of the game due to defensive reasons, but you had your best years as a starter there, especially our whole system was drafted around you because you're a shooter. You're not a guy who could put the ball on the floor. You were a strictly shoot guy. You're not like Klay Thompson or Steph who could put the ball on the floor. You were a guy who could catch and shoot, and you did it at a high level. Hell of a career, by the way. Big fan. But your best years were under him. It's just very ironic and kind of weird that you have this energy towards him in terms of him never, ever being accountable, considering he's always been responsible.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of those situations where there are an abundance of people who can be right. It's rare that I'm neutral and I don't take sides, but this is one of those times. And the reason why it's one of those times is because, A, listen, I've known Doc Rivers for nearly 25 years. I happen to believe he's a damn good coach. But I've seen his losses in Game 7s. I've seen his inability to get the Clippers to the conference finals and then the Philadelphia 76ers to the conference finals. He's been a head coach for 24 years, and I've been on the record saying this. If Doc Rivers, now that he's departed from television, in the middle of his contract, by the way, to take a head coaching job that most coaches would take if we're being really, really honest. You get an opportunity to coach Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard. No matter what commitment you made as a broadcaster, you're usually going to buck that aside or throw that aside to take the head coaching job to coach at a championship level. right or wrong, and we can say that it was wrong because he signed a contract and gave his word. The bottom line is most coaches would take that job. I'm not taking sides there, but I will say this. I've said this for the record. This is the last dance for Doc Rivers. If Doc Rivers doesn't win in Milwaukee by next season, because I don't think he'll be held extremely accountable this year, because he took over mid-season and he knows how hard it's been, as he's articulated. If he doesn't win by next year, I think his head coaching career is over. That's number one. But number two, what made it very interesting and compelling about what J.J. Redick had to say was this. J.J. Redick talked about all the excuses, no accountability, throwing people under the bus, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very, very harsh criticism. J.J. Redick obviously felt it very passionately. If you watch the scene on First Take, it wasn't a question that was prompted to and presented to J.J. Redick. J.J. Redick interrupted the proceedings to say, are we not going to talk about this? Are we not going to address that elephant in the room? Are we not going to tell us what's real? And he went in on Doc Rivers, his former coach for 4 years with the Clippers. He departed from the Clippers after the Clippers was signed on to Austin Rivers and obviously Jamal Crawford. And he had that much money tied up. And lo and behold, J.J. Redick departed from the Clippers and took a 1-year, $23 million deal to play for the Philadelphia 76ers, even though he himself said he had an offer from the Houston Rockets on the table because CP3, Chris Paul, was in Houston and was recruiting him to come there. But Rivers clearly feels very, very passionate about what he feels. And in his eyes, he's giving basketball analysis, but I think it extends beyond that when you use words like lack of accountability and throwing somebody under the bus. Clearly, there's more to it than just basketball there. And if you talk to anybody who talks to Doc Rivers, that's what Doc Rivers is going to say. It's personal with he and I, and left it at that. Didn't elaborate on it when I spoke to him about it, because you know I called and asked Doc Rivers, but he didn't have much to say about it. So there you have it. And Austin Rivers, speaking on behalf of his father, first started out by saying his father's a grown man, he can defend himself, but then did his job and pointed out how, wait a minute, what do you mean accountability? Is not getting fired from the Clippers not being accountable? Is not getting fired from the Philadelphia 76ers not being accountable? Is not getting fired from the Orlando Magic years ago before you went to Boston? Is that not accountable? And do you really think he's not going to be accountable in Milwaukee? So everybody had very valid points to make. What I would tell you is that when you're a player as highly intellectual, as highly abreast of what basketball entails, the way J.J. Redick is, and you go in like that, you've got reason to do so. And I got the impression that J.J. Redick's words weren't just coming from him. It was coming from an abundance of players who happen to feel a certain way about Doc Rivers. And I think it's a safe bet in saying that James Harden, now a Clipper, the former Philadelphia 76ers, playing under Doc Rivers last year, is one of those players. So make of that what you will, but keep your eyes on that, because somehow, some way, I don't suspect that storyline will go anywhere